we're now going to switch over to speaking with our guest, Gerard Starkey. Gerard, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It's a pleasure.
Okay, awesome. I'm super excited for this one. So, Gerard, just to begin, can you kind of just give us a backstory? I think you have like the most valuable MJ game-worn collection out there. Can you kind of just give us an intro into how you got into collecting these items? And yeah, just the story behind that.
I think first, just to correct slightly, at one point in time, I was definitely the most valuable Michael Jordan collector. But in recent years, some very, very large investors have come in and bought up, millions of dollars of items in a very short span of time. So I'm definitely up there in the top 2 or 3 guys, but I'm possibly not the most valuable at this stage, but I was at one point.
Okay, you're in the conversation for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely up there, but I don't want to claim the crown, without giving my peers and fellow collectors, the same type of esteem all the way up at the top there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, I'm definitely not the most valuable, but I'm up there. But for me, it started before value was even like a concern, because for me, it started out of pure passion as a teenager, actually, to be honest. And as you said earlier on, I've been collecting for about 25 plus years. And it didn't necessarily start in Michael Jordan stuff specifically, like stuff he'd actually used. It actually started just in kind of the regular, kind of original Jordans that were available at the time. And I gradually progressed through the various kind of categories of collecting, whether it was like originals, hard to get rare samples, back to originals again, and then the original market. So the original releases of the Jordan shoes was very hot in late 90s, early 2000s. Like it just increased massively. And I actually was given a pair of game-worn Jordan Carmines just from an ESPN athlete. I can go into that story at some point, but I was given them by an ESPN sort of cameraman who was French. And as soon as I held that asset, the asset that I previously, I owned at the time, but that I had previously collected, didn't mean as much to me because I had this asset that represented this athlete. And at that point, I took the opportunity to sell all my originals, which I sold very quickly. And I basically plugged it all into actual game-used items. And now that was not as easy to find, but I'm quite resourceful. I speak 7 or 8 languages, so I basically went into the market on a global scale and just bought everything I could. And this went on for about 10, 15 years before like the real boom happened. And I did it quite silently because that was just my strategy. Not being quite a competitive person and I was based in London most of that time. So all of my peers were in Asia and the States. So for me to get stuff, I had to really hustle and bustle and just grab as much as I could. And yeah, to this day, I don't sell my own collection. I just vault stuff and enjoy it and have it on display at my home and rotate it. And collecting's, I still obviously enjoy collecting, but it's much harder now because the caliber of items I want to collect, it's large sums of money, and I have to be quite selective, to be honest, because I can't compete with all the big boys in the current market. However, I obviously have a number of assets that these guys want. So the only way for me to really get into some of the really big multi-million dollar items is to trade out. But that's kind of my collecting career in a nutshell. And now I've built up so much expertise in the space that I dibble and dabble in helping the Jordan brand do marketing campaigns. I'm an advisor to big collectors around the world, helping them build up their collections, make them cost neutral, do things with their collections. I do storytelling and displays around the world with various clients and partners. And I've got my own authentication company, SAS, where just like Public's doing, my main goal is to educate so that people can understand the assets, appreciate the assets, and get a really good sense of the value of the assets, because I think that's quite important. And I think that is going to be the key element that this particular space, and actually any collecting space, is going to focus on in the next sort of 3 to 5 years. It's all going to be about really getting specific, really getting clear valuations of stuff. Because at the moment, I think things are still bouncing around. But we'll get into that as we go through the questions. So that's me and my collection career from start to end, and looking forward.
Okay, sweet. As you were saying that, I was like, Jared is living the dream. Like the dream of any NBA fan, Michael Jordan fan, he is living it. I wanted to ask you, because I think this is really interesting, and also just to give people in the audience a bit more context, can you kind of just talk us through some of like those highlight pieces, assets that are currently in your collection, maybe like 2 or 3 of your favorite ones, and then also take us through like, how did you even get it? Maybe you can give us like a quick story of an interesting acquisition story.
Okay, I think probably the asset that I own, the pair of shoes I own that people will most likely recognize, is that I own the shot. So I own the black cement Jordan 4s that Michael Jordan wore when he hit the shot over Craig Elo of the Cavs. And that for me is definitely, in terms of emotional value and an asset that captures a really big turning point, not just in Michael Jordan's career, but in the whole basketball NBA kind of history. It's, in my opinion, it's top 3, possibly top 1 or 2 moments ever. Yeah, so that's definitely, in my opinion, the biggest asset that people will really appreciate, I think, on a global scale, without question. I'm trying to think. Assets. Oh, I'm trying to think. I own obscure pieces like the Nike Alpha Force that Michael Jordan wore in the same kind of period as he was wearing Jordan 3s and 4s, and he was trying to, get comfortable in the shoes. There's some talk about it being a transition point. Am I going to stick with Jordan? They're trying different midsoles, shoes, models, and he actually started wearing Nike Alpha Force, which isn't a Jordan shoe, but he wore them 2 or 3 times, and I have the pair that he played in against the Milwaukee Bucks. So that's a cool, very unique piece. Not as big a celebrity as say the shot, but definitely for me, it's a piece that I appreciate a lot. And then you were saying other shoes that I would love to have in my collection that have eluded me. I mean, the obvious one for me is The Last Shot, which is Michael Jordan's final pair of shoes, which, I mean, I've literally searched for it. I mean, I'm a resourceful man. I've searched for it far and wide. And, there's 2 pairs out there, and one of them potentially is that model. But there's also a possibility that Michael Jordan has kept that one himself, which would make sense to me. But it's just not a pair that I've ever been able to acquire. But that would be monumental. I mean, the closest pair I've seen to that very last pair is actually up at Christie's. Actually, it's an auction I'm helping with. Here's a shameless plug. But there is an amazing low 13 game-worn Michael Jordan sample that's actually on the market as we speak, and that's pretty much as close as I think any of us will get to that last shot ever. And that's an amazing piece. Yeah.
It's so cool just hearing you break it down. I'm curious, like when you even think to yourself, like, I would love to own the Last Shot piece or the Last Shot sneaker, right? How does that process of even trying to track it down start? Like, is it all just personal connections? Is it like, what's even that research process to finding where it is, who owns it, if you could get it?
Yeah, I mean, my process is, I mean, just for everybody knows, I'm an actuary by profession. So my mind's quite analytical. I love a good spreadsheet. I love a good list. So over the years, I've basically built databases of, where these assets are, whether it's jerseys, shoes, bats, helmets, not necessarily specific to Michael Jordan, but where big assets are, who owns them, their numbers, their emails, some photos of those assets, the tagging, just so I can, keep myself fully educated as to, the authenticity and what I should be looking for. So I do actually have big personal databases that, are super valuable to me and help me try to track these things down. And once you get into the circle, you do meet insiders to these athletes, these gods, so to say, of the world, and you can navigate through. There's a way to navigate through that community and figure out how to get at assets. Once you do a deal, I mean, whenever I do deals in the past, you were never buying one item. It wasn't efficient. You were potentially having to get on a plane and travel to Hong Kong or New York. And as I said, I was based in London and Europe most of the time. So if I was going in, I was going in for the kill, and I was going to buy as much as I could, and when you get known to be a reliable person who does deals, who buys stuff off the medics, the teammates, the ball boys, you that they pass you around respectfully, and you can, pay the right money for the assets. And at the time, it was much simpler. Like I said, they were trying to get rid of assets anonymously without going to the market. There wasn't really a deep liquid market for them at that point. And they also didn't want to be known to be selling the asset that Michael Jordan gave them. So it was much easier. But that's how I'd go about it. And I apply the same technique. Circle still exists. There are other layers. There are more auction houses. There are more dealers. There are more middlemen. But it's just navigating the space, like any space, just like buying a house or a property. It's very similar, actually.
Okay, awesome. I wanna zoom out a little bit. I know there's probably a lot of people in the audience who are interested in potentially investing in sports memorabilia and just learning more about the market in general. Could you kind of just quickly define for us what exactly is the sports memorabilia market, and then what makes this category special?
Well, the sports memorabilia market as an asset, if I was thinking about it in a real simple kind of definition, any asset that captures an athlete, either his image or a moment or an event in sports history, and this can be purely a photo on a card or an actual item used at that point in time, or something with a signature from that era. It's a very broad category, so it captures any asset that kind of captures the essence of an athlete. And why it's an interesting category, because I mean, for me, first to take one quick step back to make it clear what the following statement means. To me, it is art. These are moments that people have created at the very peak of their career. And if anybody on the call has ever, gone down that route of being an athlete or doing a sport, it is extremely difficult to work your way up that ladder to become the top person. Just like any artist would have had to work, hundreds of thousands of hours, to be known as the Michelangelo or the Picasso of the world. These athletes have created these moments by being that great. So for me, they aren't just rubber and canvas and suede and leather and and wood and whatever materials I use in the equipment. They're actual moments in time that represent something very deep, very hard to achieve, and hence they are pieces of art, which become talking points, become storytelling points, and that's how I treat it. So to me, they it's art. It's the emotional value. It's the moment. It's a historical moment in time that they capture, that they represent, that gives them value.
Yeah, I think to your point, the emotional value is so strong, right? Like we remember those moments that MJ last game shot and different moments. One thing I'm interested from the investor perspective, what are some of the factors, the value drivers of a certain piece of like sports memorabilia? I know you mentioned obviously like the moment, like what it's associated with, the athlete. Is there anything else? Can you kind of just elaborate on what some of those important factors are?
I mean, those are extremely important facts that you raise, but I think rarity is key, like with any asset. And now that the space is becoming much more liquid and much more educated, people really understand what rarity actually means. Now, for me, rarity is literally a handful, and I know there are assets out there. I mean, there is an intersection between demand and supply, and the perfect example for me is like the card market. The sports card market, there could be 200,000 people who want this one card, and there's only 700 of them, and that seems like a very high demand ratio. And I agree, but actually, ultimate or absolute rarity, where you can have something that like 2 or 3 or no other person has, that for me is the ultimate factor. And as we get more educated, we need to know how to filter down to what that rarity actually means. So in cards, there are populations, you have to think of what is important in the card. What is the emotional value in the card market is my interpretation. So all the basic stuff about the quality of the card, the centering of the card, the edges of the card, how perfect that card, the surface, those are all very easy parameters to understand. The hard bit is actually delving down into actual rarity and the authenticity and the meaningfulness of that card. So I think with cards, the excitement usually comes from, say, pulling a card. So being able to calculate and understand the probability of you actually pulling that card, that is going to be a big factor in rarity. Which athlete it was related to, that's going to have a big, it's going to be a big driver of value and rarity. Within each of those athletes has 1 or 2 cards that are the cards to have. Actually, they probably all have one card that is the card. And if it is the card, that is then your basic kind of starting point. This is the card I want for Gretzky or for Mantle or for MJ. And then you have to take that particular card and then filter that particular example down into the best version of that example. With game use stuff, it's slightly more complex it's far more complex because authenticating a card is quite simple because they are just pieces of paper that capture that nostalgia. Authenticating and valuing game use jerseys and shoes there are a lot more intricate details to look at, tags and wear, and you go down this angle of photo matching, and we'll talk about a bit more about photo matching later on. But after photo matching and understanding signatures, it then gets into this kind of moment space, and up to that photo matching kind of factor that you're considering, the prices on these things will be capped because it's just photo matched, and it could be just a regular season game, but it's photo matched, he wore it, so it's great. It's a great asset, but the price will be capped. The moment it's photo matched, but also the moment that it's photo matched to is huge or significant or a turning point, then the price will just shoot up. And that's because it's rarity, meaningfulness, emotional value, and that's what these assets, that's why those assets then sort of transition from a sports card or a sports item into a piece of art and a piece of history. And I think people are getting far more educated. I mean, there are a lot of thought thinkers kind of like myself, and there's lots of people in the market who who try to go out there and kind of give these parameters to people and give that kind of food for thought so they can think about the value themselves. And it is complicated, but I do really feel that the market is getting very sophisticated and buyers are getting very sophisticated and very demanding. And that's right, I think. And I actually support that a lot because it gives the space credibility and value.
One thing I think that's so interesting as I was listening to you speak is that, and I think this is it's a great point also for our audience as, they continue to learn more about alts, and I'm even on my own journey of learning more about alts. And I think every kind of alts category has its own nuances, when it comes to evaluating an asset. So for instance, you gave the example of sports cards where like the grading and the condition of the card is like a huge determinant. There's different determinants when you look at like the art market or comic book market, and then obviously sports memorabilia. Could you just elaborate a bit more? You spoke about photo matching. Can we start at the beginning? Like, what is even photo matching? Can you kind of just explain that whole process? Like, what does it even mean?
So photo matching, so this will apply to game used stuff firstly. So you photo match game used items. And what that effectively means is that using images and video for when the asset was actually used, you're effectively able to superimpose the asset you have in your hand on top of the image, and every single crease, loose thread, game used blemish, production blemish lines up so that it is absolutely conclusive that the asset you have in your hand is the exact asset used by Maradona or by MJ or by David Beckham. And there's a zero doubt there. I mean, it's just conclusively matched and attributed to that particular moment. And then if that moment is a big moment, then that's the next stage of kind of research and value. And actually, to be honest, in my opinion, once you've got the photo matched assets, you get so far up the chain, it's the moment that really adds value, And I think, and the uniqueness of that moment and, factors that the asset have that relate to that moment. For example, a perfect example of a photo matched asset is something that public actually have within their portfolio is the shattered backboard Air Jordan 1, which is, I'm obviously biased because, I was involved in that particular transaction some years ago. But that asset it has photos of Michael Jordan taking off his shoes and giving them to the other athlete. Now, that's just unheard of. And that particular nuance parameter is super important because it not only photo matches the asset to something that MJ would have worn in a big moment, but it also photo matches the backstory and the provenance. So you've conclusively photo matched the asset, but also conclusively fact checked, and you have photographic evidence of the backstory and how it actually got from Michael Jordan's feet to the open market. And the fact that Michael Jordan was the person handing the asset over is so significant because usually it would go into the admin team or his charity team or, there would be a process because he was such a huge, huge, huge athlete. And he was huge from day one. People knew he was a big deal from day one. So to have an asset that comes direct from him, insane. And for me personally, if I were to value it, it's way up there. It's way up there. Maradona's hand of God and, Kobe's rookie jerseys have absolutely nothing on that particular shoe, but it requires a level of kind of understanding and appreciation of what it actually is,
Yeah, no, it's so interesting. I'm kind of interested to talk and get your opinion on what's happening in the market currently. I know if we look at the top of the market, we saw in 2021 there was the sale of the 1984 Michael Jordan airships, which kind of set a record at Sotheby's for over $1.4 million. What have we seen happen from that point? I know you alluded to some other like sports memorabilia sales just there in the hand of God and different things. What are we kind of seeing in the market right now?
Yeah. So what is happening here is that the buyers and the investors in these particular assets are extremely educated, and they know exactly what they need that asset to have for it to be effectively a one of one or a really big momentous moment. So the hand of God, whatever, the 9.3 million for that jersey, it makes absolute sense, because it doesn't matter what you do in life or what you're interested in life. We know who Diego Maradona is, and we know about that moment, and it's not particularly, a positive, a positive moment. It is a moment that has a lot of controversy attached to it, and that just makes it a great asset, which is why that value makes sense. And it shows you the capability of some of these assets. The Kobe Bryant rookie jerseys is one that sold for 3.6 and one that sold for 2.6, 2.7. Yeah, photo matched rookie moment, rookie jersey. Obviously, the passing of Kobe has helped those jerseys as well. Rest in peace. But it just shows you that people really know what they want, and it has to have every single parameter. If you had a photo of, the Hodges, who got the jersey from Maradona, is obviously proof of very good provenance, but there's no photo of Diego Maradona giving the jersey to him. But it's obviously the exact jersey, because it's photo matched. And it was a very easy photo match and a great photo match, but it was it's such a unique moment. It was easy. But had Diego Maradona signed that jersey, or if there was an image of him not being able to really speak English and Hodges saying, "Hey, pointing, give me your jersey," if there was that if that was documented, it would be even more valuable. Similar with the Kobe jerseys, if there were other attributes that made it more unique and that made the story more clear, the value just goes up, But so yeah, I think it's what's going on in the market is people are really buying really meaningful stuff. I can speak more. I think my knowledge is definitely more expert on the memorabilia side than as in game used memorabilia side, and I think that's what's happening there. And my view on the card market is that people are getting more educated on what actual rarity is, and I think game used and cards, there's definitely a vintage, historic, and kind of modern market. As there is with cards, I do just think by default the vintage market will always be more valuable. But obviously, as time surpasses, the new market becomes vintage, and it will gradually grow. But there are giants in the sports world, and they've been the same giants for many, many years. Even with Kobe Bryant is a good example. And I think, as I said, that's why I said his passing has added value to those particular jerseys. But the Michael Jordan rookie jersey, should be, if there was a photo matched one. If there was a photo matched one, it would be significantly more valuable than that. And I think a lot of the collectors in the sports space would agree to that. I know Michael Jordan's still alive, but he's not going to create any more of those moments. I've recently seen an amazing asset, which I can't wait till it comes to market. But I've seen his first playoff rookie shoes, and it's a really great photo match. And if a Kobe jersey sells for 3.6 million, I can see when a shoe like that comes to market, it will just explode that particular value, because it's such an iconic shoe, and it's his very first playoff, and it was used in like 2 or 3 of the games. So yeah, I think people want the big pieces. The big investors want the big pieces. This is helping the medium and lower side of the market, but I do think that side of the market will stabilize a bit more, and the values will be very clear to everybody. But yeah, that's what I think what's going on. I think education is going to be key in terms of estimating the values.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. I'm going to ask you one more quick question because I know that we're running over. Um, and I think it's such a great point that you make about education, and it's great to hear that, like, as the market's maturing, that people, they're getting more educated and they're getting more knowledgeable about these assets. And it's such a great time for the public, for our audience, to then kind of come into these categories as well. My final question for you was, you spoke about Maradona, Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan. These are obviously like pantheon, all-time great athletes, right? When you look at the current kind of crop of athletes who are playing now, are there any that you look at and you think, once their kind of game-worn memorabilia kind of gets out there in the future, it could rival, in terms of the sale price, it could kind of rival what we've seen with like the MJ assets or the Kobe assets or the Maradona assets? Are there any kind of athletes that you look at that would do that?
Yeah, I definitely think they have potential to get up there. This is in the basketball world, the Lucas and the Steph Currys, they will get up there. The one thing I will say for the modern athletes in basketball and other sports is that their game issued items are much more abundant. So they will be just a much larger supply. That also applies to cards as well. There's a huge supply of modern cards. I do think they can get up there, but they literally have to check every single box. It would have to be highest scoring game, best playoff run. You won't really have many multi game worn stuff because they'll just change because of the abundance of the jerseys and stuff, for example. But yeah, there definitely are players that will get up there in basketball and football. I'm trying to think. Well, obviously the Neymars and the Mbappes of the world will get up there because there's a direct link there to the Messis and the Ronaldos and the Van Bastens of the world. But I think more. I think what would be the thing to look out for is the gods of the other sports where less focus is currently on at the moment. Those are the ones that will come up, I think. I mean, I do honestly think basketball will always be Michael Jordan, and then the Kobes and LeBrons and the other greats. Boxing will always be, Mike Tyson. The F1 racing market will always be Schumacher. Even though Lewis Hamilton and the Verstappens will be up there. Everybody's going to want to go back to Schumacher. But I think with education and people understanding all the parameters that they're interested in and getting that real one-of-one meaningful moment, those will be the assets we need to look out for that will just jump up there. So not necessarily specifically, well, obviously they have to be very good athletes in whatever sport they play, but it will be that one-of-oneness, really unique story that makes them valuable.
No, super, super insightful. Thank you so much, Gerard, for joining us today. Thanks to the audience. It's been great to have everyone on, and we will see you on the next episode of The Alt Show. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you would like to see more content like this, subscribe to our channel and download the public app where you can listen to these sessions in live time.